This is Money Guide with Mary Sterk from Sterk Financial Services. Now, here's Mary Sterk.
Welcome to Money Guide with Mary Sterk. I am Mary Sterk, founding partner and CEO of Sterk Financial Services. You know, we're really lucky we have a handful of very talented female financial advisors who know a lot of things about money and finance. And so today we're going to have a couple of those advisors talk to you about a very important topic. You won't want to miss it.
Hey everybody, my name is Julie Chadwick. I'm a financial advisor and partner at Sterk Financial, and I've got with me Kelsey Bankey, another partner and advisor with us today.
Hello, everyone.
Today we are going to talk about the Big Beautiful Bill Act, and we are going to talk about some of the changes in it with charitable giving. We've got a lot of changes to talk about, so we're excited to get started with you today.
Yes, One Big Beautiful Bill Act had so many things. So as part of our series on One Big Beautiful Bill Act sessions, we are going to talk today about the changes to charitable giving. So the provisions that were passed in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, you know, they say the goal was to simplify the tax code, reduce deductions. I think this is a little bit more simplified, but there's some pieces of it that I think actually are a little bit more complicated. So I don't know if they necessarily accomplished their mission or not on that one. But essentially, the changes do impact, if you are charitable at all, the change is going to impact you in one way or another. Whether sometimes it might be good, for some people it might not be as good. Regardless, for everyone, good planning can help you take advantage of, or figure out the best way to take advantage, I'll say, of what the code says.
Right. A lot of times we find many people that are charitably inclined and they enjoy giving back. Yet a lot of times we see that donations or charitable giving can be thwarted kind of by some restrictions in the tax law. So when someone says, hey, yeah, I definitely want to be charitable, and we're like, okay, well, you're not going to get any benefit out of it, they might be like, okay, well, maybe I'll do something different. So we are always looking for ways to help align with people's desires and goals to be able to be charitable inclined, and obviously align it with any tax saving strategies that we can as well. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, and so this one also kind of, along with some of the other changes that they made in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, this kind of goes to adjusting a little bit from the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017. So it was at that time that, you know, there was a lot more people that itemized before that law change, and then it dropped down to like only 10% of tax filers in the country itemized. So I forget the number. It was a large number, but there was a lot more people. And then after the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, it went down to only about 10%. And so one of the major changes there is impacting, you know, like I said, it's affecting everybody.
Right.
But I think one of the biggest changes here is they've made permanent the 60% of AGI contribution for cash gifts that is for people who itemize. So this only applies to people that itemize. Your ability to deduct is capped at 60% of AGI. Okay, so for some people, and that's been around, but they've made it permanent. So, you know, you can't take and throw 100% of your income in a year toward a charity. As wonderful as that would be to be able to do that, and for people who are that generous, like, I commend you for sure. But the IRS does limit you to 60% of AGI there. So.
This does make a difference too for non-itemizers, excuse me. So that's kind of a tongue twister. So like people, and effective in 2026, people who don't itemize, it'll still make a different impact on them. So it provides a new above the line deduction that permits people who don't itemize to deduct charitable gifts made to a charity in up to an amount of $1,000 for single filers, and then it's $2,000 for married, filing jointly. So this again is only for cash donations or cash contributions, I should say. That will make it so even if you don't itemize, you can still have some benefit of this and get a deduction on your taxes. So
yeah, so for the first rule we talked about, that only affects 10%. And again, the very charitable people in that 10%. The second rule Julie just read off, that impacts pretty much everybody that's charitable in the 90% of the population that is not itemizing, that's using a standard deduction. So up to, you know, from the Tax Cut and Jobs Act to now, you really didn't get any kind of tax benefit for donating to charity, which, what's amazing is the charities and the organizations out there that are 501(c)(3s, they're still thriving. They are still flourishing,
Mhm.
which means we've either got a lot of people in that top 10% that are donating, which I think is the case, but everybody's still in that 90% category has still been very generous, even though they're not getting a tax benefit. So I really like that the IRS, that in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, through the IRS, we're going to be able to get people in that non-itemizing category some recognition on
Something.
their
Yeah.
taxes for being charitable. So it
Right.
does, like Julie said, restrict to cash contributions. So you don't get to write off, taking something to a charity thrift store. You don't get to
Right.
donate things and that aren't cash and get benefit as cash contributions. So
Right.
okay, so then there's another one, and this is also to people who itemize again.
Hmm.
And so this is where I'm like, I'm not so sure they're making this less complicated. So let's work through this for a second. People who itemize
Right.
only get to deduct the amount of contributions that they have that are in excess of 0.5% of their AGI. So that was a lot. That was a
Right.
lot there. So let's put this into numbers. Okay, so somebody who has a couple that has an AGI of $400,000, 0.5% of $400,000 is $2,000. So what that means is if they're going to get credit on their taxes, on their itemized tax filing for contributions to charity, they can only do what's in excess of that $2,000.
Right.
Okay, so the first $2,000 they get no tax benefit
Mhm.
for, but everything above that, up to 60% of their AGI, is eligible to be benefiting them on their taxes.
So simple, right? It's always simple when it's the government, right? They always have they always say always except for this situation. So there's always
This
stipulations.
This right here is going to be a fun question that a lot of tax preparers get asked is,
Yes.
what is that number? I have no idea. So now I think a lot of people probably, again, a lot of people donate out of the kindness of their heart, but certainly if they can get a tax benefit, it's probably going to incentivize even more donations. This is where some really good planning is going to be beneficial because if you don't get anything for the first 0.5%, but maybe you're only doing 3 or 4% some years, and maybe you're only doing 0.25% some years, right? It might make sense to do stacking contributions or something like that. There's a lot of different strategy that can come into the play in that, but good tax preparation, good financial planning, hopefully again helps you take advantage of the best possible scenarios you can come up with this tax law change.
Right. So kind of in plain English, this helps open up the tax incentive for many more taxpayers, right? Because we talked about the itemizers too, especially those taking the standard deduction, right, to give to a charity. So it incites them to do that. And then donors with small contributions relative to income, they may lose the deduction benefit unless, like what Kelsey was saying, if you have a bunch of small ones, you might want to consider bunching them together in a single year, right, to be able to get over that threshold so it makes it count for you for your taxes as well.
Absolutely. Or if you are a person that regularly itemizes, but your income fluctuates
Mhm.
drastically,
Yeah.
then again, timing, pushing donations to one tax year versus a different tax year there might be some play. So I think there's several ideas in this,
Hmm.
but everybody is going to be very unique
Yeah.
for sure.
Right.
So.
Not a one size fits all for everybody. So that's why it's important to talk to us or your tax person and we can help guide you in that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, only like we said, 10% of taxpayers utilize itemized deductions. So the above the line deductions that are impacting the 90% that don't.
Mhm.
That's really, I'm just really excited about this because this introduces some benefit. I don't want to say for the little guy, but kind of it's in the world of tax preparing, you've got the big 10% and then everybody else.
Mhm.
This introduces incentive and honestly rewards people a little bit for being charitable and
Right.
sharing love with those 501(c)(3s.
Right. So, I mean, basically, if you're charitable or itemized or not, these changes will affect you, and proper planning will be able to help you realize those tax saving strategies, right? So it's important to visit with us or your tax person with that, because the tax savings potential can be huge, right? And there are certain years where it may make a bigger difference. So a lot of times we've been able to help people say, you know what? Since you only have a few items that you're looking at doing this year, maybe we push that to next year and bunch them together. And they're like, hey, never thought of that. So there's just a lot of different ways to look at it, but it's great just to kind of, bend our ear a little bit, and we can kind of put some different ideas in your head. We do a really good job of helping people realize those opportunities and then aligning it, like I said, with the tax saving strategies too.
Yeah, and that's not just on taxes. That's kind of an
Yep.
interesting thing is timing matters in
Yeah.
so much. Like I've seen and talked with people, they come in for a first appointment and they're telling me kind of what they're thinking, what's going on in their life. And it's amazing how we come across scenarios. It's like, okay, do this at this time or do this at that time or hurry up and do it or wait and do whatever it is we're talking about. And the timing matters. Like it really
Oh,
matters in
yes.
so many things. So I had a situation. I had a client or potential client that walked in and we were talking and they had just retired and had just reached out to have a conversation with somebody, now that they're retired, they wanted to put everything in order. And had they waited to retire, had they had a conversation before they actually gave their resignation, and had they waited by just 1 week, we were talking tens of thousands of dollars of difference in what their retirement package taxation would have been. I was like, oh man, I really wish you would have came and seen me a
Yes.
couple of weeks ago.
First,
That would have saved you a lot. But that's just, I guess, an example of what I hope you're having conversations. There's a lot of value that we can bring in helping just understand the nuance, right? There's
right.
little nuance in the tax code, there's little nuance in retirement plans, in Social Security, and all these different things. And so most of the time, what you're doing is probably going to be fine in the timing standpoint. But there are many situations where this day versus that day, this week versus that week, this month versus that month can make all the difference and really be a big number difference for you when it comes to your net worth.
Congratulations to Mary Sterk and the team at Sterk Financial for earning a spot on multiple Forbes lists for 8 years running, including the 2025 Forbes Best in State Wealth Advisors and 2025 Forbes Top Women Wealth Advisors Best in State.
Now we're going to kind of shift the topic a little bit. And so we've talked about charitable donations for individuals, right? There's also some differences for charitable donations for corporations. Okay. So kind of the same thing. They're making different changes to either incentivize them to be able to do that and, to be able to get the tax advantage of doing being charitable for the corporation.
So let's start with what's the same.
Yeah.
Because there are a few things that are still the same. They did not change. First of all, corporations may still deduct charitable contributions up to 10% of their taxable income. So the ceiling, how much the high end of what they can deduct is still the same, 10%.
Right.
Contributions above the 10% limit.
Yeah.
So anything that's above that can still be carried forward for up to 5 years under the carry forward rule. So that's not changed as well. It's still, if you do 11%, you can still carry over that 1% for up to 5 years.
Right. So now what's new? So it's called the floor, like she had mentioned, for corporations. So a new 1% minimum threshold, or the floor, was introduced under the Big Beautiful Bill Act. So a corporation's charitable contributions are deductible only to the extent of the total contributions that they exceed 1% of the corporation's taxable income. So in other words, if a corporation has taxable income of $1 million, then only contributions above $10,000, which is 1%, are deductible, right? So subject to the 10% ceiling. So if a contribution falls below that 1% threshold in any given year, then generally it's not deductible in that year. Also, the contribution, contribution that is disallowed because of the floor, you can't carry that forward and use it in different years, like what Kelsey was talking about. So that doesn't apply if you don't hit that minimum. So you got to make sure that you're doing that in the year that you're talking about it to watch that ceiling.
Yeah, so this is a similar concept to what we talked about on individuals. The individuals that itemize have that 0.5% to 60%
Mhm.
window of contribution or charitable donations that are, subject to deduction on their taxes. Same concept, but it applies to corporations where they're in that 1% to 10% range.
Right.
So, you know, it's just some change. So they left it that there's still a lot of room there, but they did take out that first 1%,
Mhm.
just to make it, I guess, it's supposed to be a little more simplified, but again,
Yeah,
that's arguable. But
exactly.
again, lots and lots and lots of donations flow out of corporations. So I love that there's a deduction for them because it does encourage a lot of money to flow through to organizations that are doing a lot of good in our communities. So I love that that's still there. Um, but it does reduce it down to only 9% because the first 1% isn't deductible and then the next 9% is. But still, maybe it's going to encourage people to push above that 1% that hadn't been above that 1% before.
Right. It could have the adverse effect too. A lot of times, maybe sometimes smaller corporations just aren't able to do that. So it might eliminate them from doing it altogether, which we certainly hope not. And I'm sure the 501(c)(3)s hope not as well too. So
Yeah.
it does matter. So these changes make a difference. And so when we see the opportunity to be able to increase the donations, a corporation, and most corporations usually are charitably inclined, especially in their communities, right? They look forward to being able to do that and help their communities out. Obviously, if there's a tax benefit too, that may obviously increase their donation or charitability, right? So those are things that are on there. So corporations literally have been below like the 1% of taxable income. They're going to lose that immediate tax deduction for those contributions. So we're hoping that, people kind of step up and increase that. The tax deduction is one of the incentives for corporation or philanthropy. It may change or discourage companies, but we're hoping that if people are, maybe pretty close to that level, they're gonna, bump it up a little bit. Like I said, nonprofits really rely on corporate donations, especially like in their communities, right? And if they do see a difference in that, I mean, if we see future where corporations are kind of starting to drop those off, that's going to hurt nonprofits. They might have to change kind of some of their strategies as far as their goals or contribution amounts or kind of what their aims, on how they can get to corporations. All that might change a little bit. So hopefully it doesn't and we can keep that going. So
Yeah, I'm sure they're going to do, they'll do some analysis to see did this
yeah.
make a positive impact to the charities or a negative impact. And none of these changes that we're discussing in this particular episode have a sunset. They don't have a date that they expire. So they're, as we've said before and many times on these podcasts, they're made permanent until the next set of tax law changes comes through and
Right.
overrides them, but they don't have an expiration date. So I'm sure there'll be research done at the government level to see, how much money is flowing out to charities this way. And, if they see it drop too much, if this has a negative impact and people aren't supporting charities as much, I could see this being something where they go back and they tweak this a little bit to try to
Yeah.
incentivize even more going to charities. But it'll be interesting, and I'll curious to see how long that takes them and what kind of data supports that. Or maybe this is going to be like, hey, there's all these people in that 90% category of personal deductions that weren't making charitable contributions because they weren't getting any benefit. Maybe we're going to see a huge
Yeah.
surge in $1,000 and $2,000 level contributions that's going to make up for some of these other areas. Yeah. The math down the road, the hindsight will be super interesting to analyze and see what the effects were.
Right. So it's always just good. Like I said, tax law changes constantly, right? And so you don't necessarily always know what the changes are. So a lot of times we can help you out and navigate through these changes. So it's always good to, like I said, reach out to your tax professionals or your financial advisors like us, because we can help you with those tips and tricks or different advantages or new things and keep you up to date on things that have been changing. So that's where we can have a great value add to our clients and be able to help people realize the benefit of that. And also, like I said, keep it in line. If they're charitably inclined, we want them to be able, to give back, whether or not you get a tax benefit. Obviously, a tax benefit is just going to be sweetening the deal a little bit. So
Oh, cherry on the top. I
yeah,
also think
exactly.
that philanthropy is really need to hone in on some of these law changes. And I feel like the philanthropies that have some of the biggest success in capturing donations toward their goals are the ones who do the best job at helping their donors understand the financial benefit, obviously the community benefit, the impact that they're making toward their cause, but also the financial benefit to the individual. So this is going to give them some areas where they can, provide education and help, so if you run a charity or if you are,
Yeah.
on the team of people trying to help collect donations from donors, helping to educate your base about this is probably going to be helpful in getting those dollars flowing more toward your organization, or getting those donors who are, have room to go up still within their threshold, to the extent that you can know that. It could be really interesting. So yeah, more to come on this, because, this is the law change, but, we like to look at numbers and data and analyze things. And I'm really curious to see what this looks like in a few years.
So we hope you enjoyed the information we shared with you today. We know it's a lot of information. So again, remember, feel free to reach out. We've always got great information on that we'd love to share with you. Thanks for joining us today, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the advisors at Sterk Financial. We hope this has been informative and good information for you, and that it helps aid you in your journey of learning more about finance, money, investments, taxes, and different things like that. Have a great day.
Sterk Financial Services celebrated 20 years in 2024. The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of your audio provider and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities or services mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. No strategy can ensure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should only be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Securities and investment advisory services offered through Osaic Wealth, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Insurance offered through Sterk Financial Services, which is not affiliated with Osaic Wealth. Osaic Wealth is separately owned, and other entities and/or marketing names, products, or services referenced here are independent of Osaic Wealth. The rankings for the Forbes Best in State Wealth Advisors list by Shook Research is based on due diligence meetings to evaluate each advisor qualitatively, a major component of a ranking algorithm that includes client retention, industry experience, review of compliance records, firm nominations, and quantitative criteria, including assets under management and review generated for their firms. The Forbes ranking of America's top women wealth advisors is based on an algorithm of qualitative and quantitative data, rating thousands of wealth advisors with a minimum of 7 years of experience and weighing factors like revenue trends, assets under management, compliance records, industry experience, and best practices learned through telephone and in-person interviews. There is no fee in exchange for rankings. Forbes is a trademark of Forbes Media LLC. All rights reserved. Rankings and recognition from Forbes, Shook Research are no guarantee of future investment success and do not ensure that a current or prospective client will experience a higher level of performance results, and such rankings should not be construed as an endorsement of the advisor.